I get a lot of messages from people who are standing in front of a laptop screen, scrolling through specs, and wondering if they should spend a few $1,000s on a pre-built gaming tower. The hesitation is real, especially when you've seen a desktop that looks sleek, flashes RGB, and promises instant 4K gaming. My goal with this review is to cut through the hype and help you decide whether the HP OMEN 25L actually fits the way you play, works in the space you have, and gives you enough bang for the money. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's start with the everyday reality of owning a machine that's built around an Intel Core i7-10700 and an RTX 2060 Super, paired with 64 GB of RAM and a 2 TB NVMe SSD. Those numbers sound impressive on paper, but what matters is how the system behaves once you pull it out of the box, hook up a monitor, and sit down for a gaming session that lasts longer than the first level. First off, the size. The 25-liter chassis is compact enough to fit on a typical desk without dominating the whole room, yet it's still a full tower. That means you have room for decent airflow, but you also need to consider the placement of the RGB fans. In my test setup, the fans were set to a subtle cycle, and the case stayed cool even after a marathon of 1080p Battle Royale matches. If you're planning to keep the tower in a confined cabinet or a bedroom where space is tight, you'll need at least a few inches of clearance behind it to let the front intake work properly. Now, the performance side. The i7-10700 is an 8-core, 16-thread chip from the 10th generation family. For most modern titles, it's more than enough to keep frame rates high, especially when you pair it with the RTX 2060 Super. In practice, I was able to push games like Cyberpunk 2077 and Red Dead Redemption 2 to a stable 60 frames per second at 1080p with medium-high settings. The 64 GB of RAM is overkill for gaming alone, but it becomes a real advantage if you also use the PC for streaming, video editing, or running virtual machines. I ran OBS while playing and never saw a noticeable dip in the game smoothness. For a typical gamer who just wants to play, that much memory may feel like wasted cash, but for a creator gamer hybrid, it's a genuine productivity boost. Storage is where the OMEN starts to feel generous. A 2 TB NVMe SSD gives you lightning-fast load times. World of Warcraft zones load in a second or two, and large open-world titles hardly ever stutter while pulling assets from disk. The downside is that the SSD is soldered to the motherboard, so you can't swap it out for a larger drive later without opening the case and dealing with the connectors. If you anticipate needing more than 2 TB for a growing library of AAA games, you'll have to add a secondary drive, which the chassis does allow, but you'll need to purchase it separately. One of the hidden trade-offs with a pre-built like this is the software layer. HP ships Windows 11 Home with a handful of proprietary utilities for fan control and network tuning. The fan curves are reasonable out of the box, but you'll quickly notice the fans spin up a bit louder during sustained GPU load than a custom-built system with a premium aftermarket cooler. You can dial them down through HP's own app, but the interface isn't as intuitive as something like MSI Afterburner. If you're a DIY enthusiast who likes to fine-tune every component, you might feel constrained. Another practical aspect is the Wi-Fi 6 module. In a house with a solid router, I saw no difference between Wi-Fi 6 and a wired Ethernet connection for most games, but the wireless capability shines if you're in a dorm or a condo where running a cable is a pain. The module is built into the motherboard, so there's no extra dongle clutter, and the latency held up well in fast-paced shooters. If you always game over a wired connection, this is a nice-to-have rather than a must-have. Who should consider buying this OMEN? If you're a gamer who wants a ready-to-play machine without the hassle of sourcing individual parts, the OMEN delivers a balanced mix of CPU, GPU, and memory that can handle current titles at 1080p and even dip into 1440p with respectable frame rates. It's also a solid choice for streamers who need that extra RAM headroom and quick storage to switch between games and encoding tasks. The built-in RGB isn't the most elaborate, but it adds a bit of personality if you enjoy a lit-up setup. Who should skip it? First, anyone who is hunting for the absolute highest performance per dollar. The RTX 2060 Super sits a generation behind the newest RTX 40 series cards, so if you're targeting 4K ultra settings or want to future-proof for the next couple of years, you'll end up paying a premium for a GPU that will be outpaced sooner rather than later. Second, users who are particular about silent operation may find the stock fans a bit noisy during long sessions, especially